Hey guys, we are on day 116 in our Bible reading plan, and today we are reading in the book of Psalms. We're reading Psalm 73, 77, and 78 today. So Psalm 73 is a psalm of Asaph, and we read at the beginning, it says, I envied the arrogant, and we read this progression of the psalmist's judgment of other people who are wicked and God's blessing or his apparent blessing over their lives and the struggle that the psalmist has in his heart over seeing the wicked prosper. And it ends with sort of this beautiful conviction when the psalmist realizes their final destination. He's very convicted over that. And it's just this beautiful picture of God changing the psalmist's perspective. And then in Psalm 77, we read this lament of deep sorrow paired with this beautiful resolve to remember the things that the Lord has done, to look back to the Lord and remind himself of who God is and what he has done and declare those things. And then in Psalm 78, we read this statement, my people hear my teaching. And the psalmist begins to recount for the generations to come. He recounts all of the incredible things that God has done in the history of Israel. And it's this beautiful psalm that communicates the history of Israel, the greatness of God, and this desire and longing that generation after generation would not forget the good things that the Lord has done. Now, as I was reading through these Psalms today, the one that really spoke to me was Psalm 73. And I was really convicted as I read through Psalm 73 today that, my perspective is not always right. And I was reminded that sometimes it takes getting into the presence of God for him to really correct our perspective. So often we live in our circumstances, we live in a state of comparing ourselves to one another and envying one another and what we have or what we don't have. And sometimes we take those things to the Lord and we say, Lord, why this? Why that? How come they're being blessed? And it was just such a beautiful picture to me as I was reading of deep conviction that the psalmist had when he came into the presence of the Lord and he was reminded of their final destination, that the unrighteous, the people who were seemingly prospering and being blessed, their final destination, it was a destiny, an eternity without the Lord, but our eternity is in glory with God. And so I was reminded that comparing ourselves to one another, it robs us of compassion for one another, and that we're called as a people of God to be pointing people toward Jesus and toward Christ. And we can't do that if we're focusing on what we don't have and what they do have. But when we remember that we all have a final destination and the goal is that all would be saved and that all would have an eternity with Jesus, then we can put those comparisons aside and we can show up for one another in love and compassion and mercy and understanding and in kindness and gently point one another toward the love of Christ. We can gently point one another toward our value in Christ. So I was convicted today by this reading, and I was deeply encouraged by it as well, that in those moments when my perspective is off, to just come into the presence of God again, to seek out God in those hard moments, to take those deep concerns and frustrations straight to the Lord and let him change my perspective. I hope that encourages you today. I hope it blesses you, and I hope that you have an incredible day, and may the Lord draw you ever nearer into his presence as you seek him in his word today. Have a great day, guys.